All right, everybody. Real treat for you today, talking about one of my favorite, maybe obscure DC heroes, Resurrection Man. He's coming back in a new series. It's written by Ram V. Ram's kind enough to join us once again on the Comic Source to talk about it. Ram, great to see you.
Yeah, great to be here. I actually made it to the call this time. So,
Yeah, all good. So I think much like myself, loving Resurrection Man and kind of the things that you can explore. He's kind of a favorite of yours as well.
yeah, a favorite, but entirely by chance, not by history. Um, I actually found Resurrection Man while I was in the process of going through a DC Who's Who book, and I found the title to be so fascinating. I was like, well, let me look up who this character is because he's got such a cool name. And then discovered that Morrison had written him in DC 1 million, and there was a sort of buddy hero thing going on with Garth Ennis's Hitman, and so I went, well, these are creators that got me into comics, so let me find out what this is, and then discovered obviously Dan and Andy's work and Butch Guice's work on the original series, and so cool the idea of someone who dies over and over again and is reborn with powers that have something to do with how he died. And so just a wild character who could go from being, a demigod one day to being like completely useless the next. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that drew me to him as well, especially because you mentioned the different iterations. When the New 52 came back, there was another
Yeah.
series that Dan and Andy
Yeah.
did that tweaked his origin a little bit. But at various times, he's been almost a deus ex machina, polymath, and just so powerful. You're kind of flipping that on its head because yours is a black label, so we're getting a little bit of a different version as well. So, how
Yeah.
would you pitch it to somebody who maybe is familiar with the versions we've had before, but maybe somebody who's not familiar with this character at all?
Yeah. On one level, I suppose for someone who's familiar with who he's been before, um, this is a person who has lived multiple lifetimes and probably experienced the absolute peaks of superpowers there are to experience. And so, you know how you ask that question, what do you gift someone who has everything? And
Hmm.
so at the beginning of this story, we come up with this character who has decided to stop being a superhero, lived a full life, was loved with his family, was in love with his partner, and just everything was great. But there comes a time where he has to die again and he has to wake up after that. So I suppose somewhere this book was born from the idea of what do you gift to the superhero who's had a full and wonderful life? Where do you start from there? And so, yeah, I think that's an exciting to me, that's an exciting take on a character who has been that kind of Deus Ex Machina before, where we're trying not to really go like, and what other cool thing can a superpower do? We're really trying to get to like, what happens if you are a real person like this who cannot go away and keeps coming back with new powers? If you had the opportunity to live all your previous lifetimes and make better choices in them, would you take that? And would your life and the world be any better because of it? And I think that's kind of the fundamental question at the heart of it, which should be accessible to people who have no history with the character as well.
Yeah, and that's part of what I love about him. When I discovered him, in the 90s when he came out, and it was, yeah, okay, what's his power going to be when he resurrects this time? And that was the cool part. As I've gotten much older and mortality more on my mind,
Yeah.
these fundamental questions, right? Like, yeah, what if you outlived everybody? How terrible would that be? But also, like you said, dealing with, regret. The longer we go in life, the more we might look back and think about how we might do things differently. Those are fascinating concepts that are
And
really
also just
relatable.
also very sort of touched by this idea of, the whole idea of regret is something you only get to have if you know you're going to go away at some point, right?
Hmm.
Because you regret something because you don't have the time to fix it. And then if I were to tell you you must live eternally and there will still be things that you can never fix, that is really a difficult burden to carry. And it kind of leads into why the title is quantum karma and this idea of karma and comes from the Hindu philosophy of yes, you have a purpose, but to act only in service of that purpose is to betray the very idea of why you are here. And so is this contradiction that we must all reconcile with. Maybe I won't know why I'm here, but I still have to live my life like there's a reason why I'm here. And I think that's beautiful in context of this character.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fundamental idea that has been explored in different, like one of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading it was, It's a Wonderful Life, right? The idea
Yeah,
of what effect do you have and that sort of thing.
yeah,
And like you said, that burden to carry. So they're huge questions. You got to couch it in an entertaining story. So once knew you were getting a chance to tell this story and deal with these big ideas, how did you balance that with, okay, it is going to have some action. It is going to have an antagonist. And how did you kind of build it out?
yeah. I think the framework for it is super interesting because it is existing in Hindu philosophy and the idea of the cyclical universe and the idea that there's this place outside of the cycle of time that lets you look at how people live and die over and over and over again to fulfill some kind of internal purpose before they can achieve release from this cycle. And so, because that structure already exists in the philosophy of the culture that I come from, it was easy to then go, okay, cool. What if I apply that structure to a story? What if I put this resurrection man in a place where he can look at his own endless lifetimes over and over again and go, what is my purpose? What choices can I make that are better than the choices I already made? And so, in that sense, it lets me tell what would be a story rather than a philosophical treatise in a book. Um, there are antagonists that are obviously entertaining and interesting to look at. There's a World War II captain who ends up eating Resurrection Man and gaining some of his abilities, but not all of them. And so ends up as a very warped version of what this character could be. And then there's also this future version of Resurrection Man who is kind of acting like a Beatrice, guiding Mitch Shelley through his inferno, if you will. And so, yeah, it allows for all of these characters that hopefully you never realize they're there for philosophical reasons. You only see that they're there for engaging story reasons. But then by the time you arrive at the end, hopefully it leaves you with interesting enough questions.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be one of those books that makes you think. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Ram because his work can be intellectual, and we're pairing it up with one of my favorite DC characters, so I'm all in. The art is amazing as well. Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your collaboration with the artist Anand RK and how you came up with kind of the aesthetic of what you wanted it to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I knew very early on this was going to take elements of Hindu philosophy and mysticism and metaphysics. And I wanted an artist whose style could encapsulate some of that sort of psychedelic, mind expanding, whoa, what's happening here, dude, kind of elements into their work. And I think Anand's style is so of that nature. Even when he draws just like regular people, they're all slightly warped, slightly distorted, slightly feeling like they're not quite all at sort of grounded or solid in their own existence. And I feel like that really plays into the style of storytelling here. There's also He's also very good at doing just like real characters having real moments. Somebody's on a park bench talking to someone they love and drinking a glass of wine, just as good as he is drawing like a clockwork world that exists outside of time where two characters must endlessly walk the pathways of some giant mechanism. And so, again, just a wonderful artist whose unique style kind of really plays into the themes of the story.
Yeah, I love what you said there because we're talking about intimate moments, moments of connection with the emotion, but then the big kind of esoteric,
Yeah.
abstract world that he's drawing. You kind of have the same challenge when you're writing it. It touches on what we were saying before about keeping it
Yeah.
entertaining. Oh, I mean, you could go. I mean, this could be the biggest story you've ever written when we talk about, traveling from one end of time to the other and
Yeah.
looking at things for someone who can't die. How do you dial that in? Was that a challenge to, hey, how much am I going to tackle? How do I tell this story where it does balance the two?
I mean, it's kind of interesting because what you need to do to balance that story is the very thing that the story is talking about, right? The
Mm,
story is saying, I have grand purpose and there are grand designs that I must play my role in. Is that more important? Or I had to wake up tomorrow morning and go have a cup of coffee with my wife while we look at, you know, trees outside our window? Is that the most important thing? Which of these is more important? And I think it's a near impossible question to answer. But on some fundamental human level, you go like, yeah, but I can see myself drinking coffee with my wife tomorrow morning. I don't know if I can see myself, saving the universe. And I
right.
think that's the fundamental question that Resurrection Man grapples with at the beginning of the story. And that's also what I always keep in mind when I'm writing it is the only way the story is engaging is if people can see why this is all important to Resurrection Man. And it can only be important to him if there are, oh, I have to save this relationship. This person matters to me. Or I betrayed my best friend. I have to fix it. Or I wasn't there when someone else needed me. I have to fix it. And those are all things that we can engage with and we can be concerned with. The whole sort of, and what does this have to say about all of my existence in time and saving the universe? I think that comes as context to these real moments of human drama and entertainment.
That's interesting you say that because what I'm hearing is you're providing stakes for the choices that Mitch Shelley makes. That sort of makes him a hero, right? Like if you live forever, at some point it's like if everything's special, nothing's special. So if you live forever, how can any one moment matter that much? But it does to him, and I think that's where his heroism comes in.
Yes, and that's exactly what I mean. That even if you live forever, it doesn't matter how many times you wake up with a person you love and have coffee with them. They're all important. Even if you take them for granted, it doesn't matter because let's say you have even within the span of a normal human lifetime, if you meet your best friend and have a drink with them on every Saturday for the rest of your life, I think my wager is that even at 99, when you're like, all right, I'm ready to sign off and say goodbye, those Saturdays still feel like they're important. Those Saturdays still
Right.
feel good. And especially if you're a resurrection man, those kind of things. It's not and then I saved this building from being exploded by Kronos's intervention. It's not that stuff. It's I was there when this person needed me. I was there to talk to this person, every day, every Saturday of my life. That's the kind of stuff that becomes really important.
Yeah, and again, makes it relatable. So the series is Black Label. Didn't necessarily seem like there was anything that wouldn't fit in continuity or what have you. So can you talk a little bit about Black Label and the freedom and the choice to go that direction, and then also how many issues is it going to be?
It's going to be 6 issues, and yes, there's nothing it necessarily disagrees with in continuity. If anything, I think part of the exercise of this book has been also because it comments on the nature of stories and storytelling itself. Part of the endeavor with this book has been to go, cool, can we take all of the weird continuity retcons and changes with this character? And can we go, yeah, they all fit within the framework of what we're
Right.
doing. They all fit within this story. Um, but doing that has real consequences if you then apply that logic to everything else that happened around those retcons. So maybe that was a reason to say, okay, we're going to set this within its own thing. But also the story, while a lot of it takes place in the past in 1980s and 2000s, which is when the books were coming out, part of it also takes place, in 2050 and the far future at the end of all things. And to have my version of the end of all things to apply to greater continuity might be a step too far. So it feels like certainly on the future side of things, the Black Label does give it freedom to say, okay, cool, this is one version of the end of things.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and then I think also in terms of mature reading, I don't think while the content necessarily anything on the page is makes it puts it in that category. Certainly the kind of story that it is, it's sort of philosophical preoccupations. I suspect going to a 13-year-old and going, what do you think about your purpose in
Yeah.
life?
Yeah.
It might not be a point of conversation, but as you said, as you get closer to, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, you start asking these questions and suddenly the story and its preoccupations then will make that much more sense.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So, Resurrection Man, Quantum Karma in comic shops on April 2nd, everybody. Final order cutoff is March 10th, so you have until March 10th. Pre-order, pre-order, pre-order. Shelves are crowded these days. That's the best way to let your retailer know that you want the book. Best way to help out Ram and the rest of the creative team. So, as we're winding down here, Ram, anything else you want to share about the project?
Um, yeah, I think there's always future appearances that seem to be enticing to readers. So even though it is a Black Label thing centering around Resurrection Man, there's the Atom shows up, and then Kronos, the Bug-Eyed Bandit show up, and there's connections to the Human Target. Vandal Savage shows up, Phantom Stranger shows up. So it kind of explodes from here and keeps getting bigger and touching all corners of the DCU. So even if you're unfamiliar with this character, it is set in a very familiar context. So pick up the book.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I can tell it sounds like you've had a ton of fun working on it. So, best of luck with the project.
Yeah, thank you so much.